What's up, everyone? Normal Christians Podcast. My name is Bo. As always, I reserve the right to get smarter. And today I want to talk about something that really bothers me, really grinds my gears. Actually, I have no idea where that came from. I think that came from like a Family Guy episode or something. Anyway, this is something that really bothers me that's going on right now, not only in culture, but also in the church. It's bleeding over in some pretty big ways, but especially it's a big deal with culture. People love to put other people in boxes. We all love to take others and try to fit them in a nice little box. And here's what I mean by that. We love to take something that they said, take something they've done, all that, and then we love to put them as a person in a box. We love to try to define them, to fit them neatly into these four walls, whatever that is. But here's the reality, I think. Track with me here. People are so much more than we often make of them. Again, we love to try to boil people down to certain things, or to put them in a certain box, or just associate them with a certain group. But I don't think it's as easy as people try to make it, or what culture says. You've done this, therefore now you are with this group. You are now defined as a person by this thing, so this is XYZ about you. See what I'm saying? We try to boil people down to certain traits, certain easily recognizable aspects. And then with that, we do certain things. But I think people are more than we make of them. I don't think we can easily fit people into boxes. And as a matter of fact, I think it's a huge mistake. But why do we do this? Right? Maybe you're hearing this, and hopefully you're hearing this and understanding what I'm saying. It's hard for me to look around culture and not see it everywhere, right? A person will tweet out a certain thing. Uh-oh, the mob has them in their sights. Oh, how dare you say that? That is this thing, or that is that thing. Some sort of, I don't know. That's a racist statement, a sexist statement, a non-Christian statement. That's a communist statement, a supremacist statement, whatever it is. People will say things and they'll say, aha, you said that, therefore you are this. Or you did this, therefore you are a this or a that. Or whatever it is. Oh, you gave money to this organization if you're a business. That means your business is this or that. Or Mr. CEO, you must be this or that. So whenever I'm asking, why do we do this? I think the big reason of why we try to put people into boxes is because it makes it easier for us to tell who, or in our opinions, to tell who are our friends and enemies, who is on our side, right, and who is against us. So that's why I think so often we reduce people to certain groups without much or any nuance at all. Because if people are defined by certain things, it becomes really easy to dismiss them. And I think that this is one of the biggest movements, or one of the biggest aspects of culture right now. We love to do this to others. We take that thing that they said, we take that thing that they did, and we immediately put the whole person, regardless of their history, regardless of what they do elsewhere, whatever it is, and we take them and we just fit them into this box because of that thing they said, or that thing they did, or this aspect of who they are. Maybe an immutable aspect of them, whether it be the color of their skin, whether it be a nationality, whether it be where they're from, whether it be socioeconomic status, whatever it is, because of this thing, I will now boil you down to this box. I will now have you be in this box. And the reason we do that, again, if a person is in this box, whatever that box is, to use some of the cultural terms right now, whether that be that person is a supremacist, or whether that means that they're a racist, or whether that means they're a communist, or a socialist, or a this, or that, or a Christian, or a non-Christian, or someone who is for this view or that view, whatever it is, wherever falling on the spectrum, when we could take that person and we could boil them down to this aspect of who they are, or maybe this mistake that they made, this thing that they did, and now we have them in this box, guess what we could do? We can dismiss them. We can easily push them away. We can disregard them. And it's not that we just disregard an idea or a statement. That's fine. People who say stupid things, being held accountable is fine. Or us rejecting a certain view or certain ideal that's out there. All that stuff is good. But when we go too far, in my opinion, is when we boil this person down to that thing. Now they're in this box, and let me just sweep the box away completely. Person and all. And really, we're doing this, in my opinion, because we don't want to have to deal with nuance. We don't want to have to deal with what is the truth behind people, which is that we're all complicated. We don't want to have to deal with the messiness of our views or our preconceived notions or our worldviews or our views on different subjects or the things we've said or these deep-seated, whatever it is. We don't want to have to deal with that. So what we do is we boil it down. Well, if you said this, that could only mean that you are this. Now you're in this box, and well, then I don't talk to people who are in this box. Ha! Dismiss the entire person. You don't know their history, you don't know their background, you don't know anything about them, but you've just dismissed an entire person based off of something about them. Now, again, there are times when things are said where people do need to be held accountable. Certain ideas are horrid and terrible, and there's nothing wrong with saying, look, if you hold to this ideal, it's terrible. We want none of that. So again, that's fine in one part. But even within those times, there's still a person there. And that person probably has nuance behind their views. Some people don't. And some people have done things that are absolutely horrid to a sense where, okay, yeah, all right, whatever it is. But that is the exception. And I believe a small, small exception and not the rule. Rather, again, what we do is, oh, you've said you've done this, boom, in the box, get out of here. I don't need you around me. I don't want to talk to you. I mean, I've heard Christians during 2020 and a lot that was happening saying things like, oh, well, if you are this, or you don't view this topic this way, or this thing, well, I don't want to talk to you at all. I don't need you in my life as a friend. And I just go, whoa, whoa. So you mean if someone disagrees with you on this subject, you don't want them in your life? They can't be friends with you. You're summarily dismissing an entire person and everything about them because of this one view. Now, again, let me add the nuance to this discussion for the 87th time, it feels like. There are some very terrible views, and I get that. But even still, there's a person there with some sort of nuance, with something behind the view that might be worth exploring. And that person may have value outside of their wrong view if it's a wrong view. Or, not even getting into right and wrong, their different view than you. Oh, and I should have looked up his name, but the gentleman, it's a great guy. I'm sure you could Google him, but he is a black man who's a musician who goes around and befriends KKK members. And that sounds like a ridiculous proposition because anyone in the KKK, it's hard to defend that. That is certainly something of a view where you would say, whoa, okay, who's for that? That is a terrible sort of thing. But this man isn't doing what all of culture does. We're saying, look, that's clearly an abhorrent set of views, especially whenever you deal with the history of the organization in many ways. But instead of just putting these people in a box and dismissing them, he actually goes to befriend them, and guess what happens? He's actually gotten I don't know how many, a ton of them out of the KKK and has had their views change completely. Now, I'm not saying that we should befriend people and do all this to try to convert them, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just saying this is a great example of not putting people into boxes, to reducing people to this view or this part of them, being so reductionistic with people just so that we can dismiss them, or just so that it makes it easy to deal with them, because it's easy to deal with one aspect of a person. But people are messy. People are difficult. People have varying views of different topics. And some people might view one thing one way, but another topic that should be similar a completely different way. For instance, I'll talk about myself. I mentioned this before, but I'm way more apolitical. I hate the current political climate, and I dislike politics greatly in this country as it is now. And I'm that way for many reasons, but one real reason for this, or one, I guess, bigger reason, is that I don't particularly have a political home. I hold views on both sides of the spectrum. But speaking of reductionistic, especially in today's world, man, if you don't view this thing this way, well, you're this, right? No, you're a this. You're a traitor. You're a communist. You're a socialist. Or you're a nationalist. Or you're a this. Or you're a that. Basically, you see it perfectly, actually, what I'm talking about in politics, where if you don't toe some sort of line, or you don't fall into this neatly, oh, well, you're dismissed. Or you're that sort of thing. That's why I dislike politics so much. And why I think it's so stupid. We just want, really what we want is we want a simplistic level, again, so that we can easily deal with people. We can easily dismiss them, or we can easily accept them. We can know, oh, you're against me, or you're on my team. So in today's world, if you say or do certain things, right, you're immediately put in a group. I've talked about it a little politically, but you can do it different ways socially. And you can certainly do it in the church. But when this happens, it doesn't matter what else you think. You are now that thing that person has defined you as. In a way, it's like a caricature of yourself and your views oftentimes. Sometimes immutable traits, what we do with immutable traits really bothers me. Whether it be the color of one's skin, whether it be the socioeconomic background that they have, whether it be where they're born on this earth. We reduce people and then we dismiss them most of the time because they're that person. Like, my heart breaks for what's happening with so many countries around the world, and especially, as in America, around us. I've had this conversation with people saying, like, look, I get as a country we have to have immigration laws. Understand that. But my heart also goes out to people who, certainly there are bad apples in every bushel, but a lot of people just want a better life. And I just happen to be born in America. The biggest crime that person may have committed is that they happen to be born in a different country. And as a Christian, I look at that and I go, oh, should I be able to just summarily dismiss this person because they happen to be born in a different country? And I struggle with that. Again, I'm not calling for this or that. I don't even want this to get political at all. I'm just using an example to say, in that sort of way, or to get out of that topic, because some people may be foaming at the mouth right now because anything barely political turns into something else. Socioeconomic aspects. Listen, I was born, thankfully, it's a blessing, to a tremendous family, and middle-class family. Really, there's not much that I've lacked, that I've really needed. And I worked in a detention facility where I was around people from way different life, and specifically different socioeconomic backgrounds, certainly other aspects that were different too. And it was just such a reminder to me that we love to just put people in boxes, right? For instance, you hear people talk about, well, people just need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, that old saying. Well, Martin Luther King said this, and I believe it was at Stanford. Martin Luther King Jr. said this. He said, it's extremely, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's extremely unloving to tell people without bootstraps to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. To not butcher the quote, he said, again, the general gist was, it's extremely unloving to tell people without bootstraps to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. But again, this is a sort of thing where sometimes we see people in different places and we say, well, if you would just do this, then you wouldn't be able to do that. But take my experience, sometimes, even I worked with juveniles, some of these juveniles, they had no frame of reference for a life outside of what they were accustomed to. So to tell them, hey, just work hard and you could go to college, I might as well have been telling them, look, all you have to do is learn particle physics and start studying all these different things, and then you can help lead the first mission to Mars. And I know I'm kind of joking with this, but it's as ridiculous of a proposition to them as saying that, because there was no frame of reference, there was no understanding, there was no bootstrap to pull themselves up by. But again, we see things and we say, aha, of course, it's those people doing those things, whatever it is. Pick your category. Of course it's those people doing those things. Of course. Well, if they would just do this and that. Do you see what's happening? We're saying, because of this thing, sometimes an immutable trait, I guess I should have defined that, but a trait that they cannot control, where they were born, again, the color of their skin, who their parents were, their socioeconomic class, whatever it is, something like that, we judge people off of. And so, again, we've boiled them down to this thing, and then we just dismiss them, or we judge them, or we do all this and all that. But the hard part when you deal with people is understanding how complicated they are, right? If anyone is listening who's dealt with people, you know that people are difficult. It's hard. People are complicated. No one fits perfectly into a box. And if they do, I think I'd be worried. Honestly, I would be worried. Instead, someone may be many things that we hate, but if we get to know them, we might and often do find out they really aren't an enemy, or they really aren't this other thing that we made them out to be. Really, they're just a person with an opposing view, or a different worldview, or a different upbringing, or a completely different life situation. Likewise, someone may seem like a person we love because they hold the same views of us. They're on our team. They're similar to us. But if you get to know them, they may and often do hold views or perspectives that aren't yours in other areas. Or if you get to know them, instead you may find out, wow, I judge this other person or this other group over here saying they're this, but wow, this person on my team sure looks a lot like the thing that I said I was judging, or that trait I didn't like. You may find we're a lot more similar than we are different in many, many ways. So what do we do with this? So often we label this person or that person or this thing or whatever as something else. Specifically, I hear this a lot with politics, where if this person doesn't toe the line, they're a traitor or whatever. But instead, maybe they're just a person with a different view on something or some issue. Maybe we should stop boiling people down to certain traits or to certain things. Even when they're terrible things, maybe, just maybe there's a person underneath that who has a background, who has a history, who's worth our time to not just define them by this thing or that thing. So this is why I believe it's a huge problem. We move far too quickly to label people or to confine people to this thing. Maybe a mistake that they made. Maybe it's something stupid that they said. Or maybe it's something they can't control at all. But I see it all the time. Oh, well, if those people did that, or if this person could just do this, well, it's that. Or, oh, I could never be friends with someone who has this view. Or I could never associate with that sort of thing. And I just think it's just silly. It happens far too often in culture, and it happens far too often in the church and Christianity right now because we're just taking cues from culture. Do you know how often I see infighting within the church? And not even different denominations, which we could get into that. There's so much fighting between denominations, but just within the church, I go, guys, we're all on the same team. If we're Christians, why are we fighting? Oh, well, I could never. That person goes to a megachurch. Ridiculous. And I think it's so funny because, again, I've worked in megachurches and I've worked in church plants. And I've worked for a church that I work now, which is rural and small, but I've worked urban and big and urban and small, all this sort of stuff. And there's so much more that it connects us that separates us. We are a million times more similar than different. But I remember at church not that long ago, I mentioned something about the megachurch, and there was an individual in my church. I could see their head shaking it, just in pure judgment of this thing I was saying about the megachurch. And it stuck out to me because I went, man, what a sad statement about us in Christianity where we don't celebrate others nearly as much. We don't weep with others nearly as much, but we're really quick to judge others. We're really quick, especially now in our culture, now throw in politics. Oh, how could you be a Christian if you believe this? Oh, well, you know how they have rhinos and dinos, which is for political purposes. A rhino is a Republican in name only, basically a Republican who doesn't follow the Republican, toe the Republican line, or Dino is a Democrat in name only, a Democrat who doesn't toe the party line. Well, you have, I don't know how to pronounce it, but CINO, Christians in name only. Yeah, I've seen that pop up where other Christians are hating on Christians because according to their view of Christianity, this person's not towing the line. So they're clearly in name only. But I think it's so stupid because if you look at the statistics with what the progression of Christianity looks like it's going to be, and I have in front of me, it's called Status of Global Christianity 2020 in the context of 1900 to 2050. Basically, it's sketching out what the past of Christianity was and what the future of Christianity will be in many different statistical categories. One big area that I love says Christian affiliation by continent. And in 2020, you have this sort of distribution. But by 2050, for instance, Christianity in Africa is going to double. Christianity in Asia will almost double, a little less than doubling. Rather, Christianity in Europe will decline. Latin America will see an increase, but a nominal increase. The Oceania region will also increase, but not a tremendous increase. And North America will increase, but again, a very nominal increase in North America. So why do I say that? We love to view within Christianity, well, this is how Christianity looks like, and this is what it is. And certainly there are doctrines and beliefs that make us Christian, and we will never bow down on those, and we will stand firm, and that is what it is. That's what makes us Christians. But some of the other non-essential aspects that we fight over or we judge others over are just nonsense because Christianity is going to change. It's going to change in the next 30 years. And a big part of that is Christianity is going to blow up in places like Africa and Asia, and it's going to either be stagnant or decline in the West in some areas. So guess what? If your Christianity looks a certain way right now, it might look completely different in 30 years. And so all these people that you summarily dismissed or you hated on for not towing a line, you might look back and go, wow, that was really dumb that I fought that battle. Why? Because everything in culture right now is reduce people. Reduce people to these sort of things. Oh, you believe that? Now I've reduced you. You're not really a Christian. Or you might walk through the pearly gates, if you will, to use that imagery, but you're not really doing what you should do and all this sort of stuff. And it's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. And it bothers me. It really bothers me. We're a very reductionistic people right now. We love to put people in a box, reduce them to this sort of thing. Oh, you believe this? X, Y, Z. Now, again, there are certainly wrong beliefs and certainly wrong beliefs within Christianity and the church. Again, we can hold on to that truth while also holding on to there are other secondary, non-essential aspects that there should be freedom in and that we should be okay with without judgment or without reducing people. And applying it to culture as a whole, we've got to stop putting people in boxes. We've got to stop trying to reduce people that because you say you believe this, or you have this view, or maybe you're even on this quote-unquote team on this sort of thing. That's still a person. Quit reducing them. There's more to them. There's more, and there's probably more to your view and to you as a person. And if you've ever been in the crosshairs and been reduced down to the one thing you said or the one thing you did, it's devastating. So Christians, we got to stop doing that. We've got to be loving people. Just look through the Gospels. Look through Jesus' life. People looked at a Samaritan and they hated the Samaritans in so many ways, but Jesus made him the hero of the story in the parable that he gave. You also had the woman at the well, right? She was an outcast of society, but Jesus went. Not only was she different than being a Jew, but Jesus went. She's an outcast. 5 husbands, all this sort of stuff. Jesus ministered to her. The Pharisees, the religious people, looked at Jesus with the tax collectors and other quote-unquote sinners. And they asked his disciples, why would your teacher dine with these people? And Jesus said, hey man, does a doctor go to those who are well? He said, I came for the sick, for the broken, for those away from him. So just look at Jesus' life. You could define people, oh, that's a sinner. Oh, that's a tax collector. He's the bottom of the barrel, but there's still a person there. There's still other views. There's still value. So let's stop reducing people. Let's stop judging people in our minds simply because of one thing or another. Sure, there are people who we will not agree, and maybe they're just bad people, but most people aren't that way. I believe we just too quickly reduce them. We too quickly want to put people in a box. And maybe the world and culture keeps going that way, but as Christians, we absolutely should not. Let's stop reducing people. Let's stop putting them in a box, right? Well, hey, thanks for listening to my rant on what has bothered me here, because it has for a while. But hopefully you'll join me on it. It's something that I'm working on. I am certainly guilty as anyone else, but I'm working on it and have been working on it. But thank you for taking the time. 3515, and I'll see you next time.